It impacts almost everything from your ability to negotiate a six-figure salary, to network effectively, to give moving speeches, to find a suitable mate, to grow on social media, to sell your products and services effectively. I'm talking about verbal communication, everything from speaking and articulation to the actual idea generation. Over the years, I've definitely developed my abilities to speak effectively and communicate my ideas, and I've had quite a few comments asking about how I've got there, like how I've grown into the person that I am when it comes to public speaking. And I wanted to share some of the tips that I've learned over these years. I know that there is growth, there is always room for growth, but I think these things have helped me tremendously over the years, and I want to share them with you, so let's not waste any more time. The first thing relates to studying language and books. Now, I've had questions about, do I read any particular books around public speaking and so forth? And the answer is actually no. I don't think I've ever read a book that was specifically designed for, how to become a better public speaker, or, how to speak and articulate yourself in X or Y way. What I have done though is read extensively over my life. I'm talking about from the time that I was very young and in school. I would be up until like all hours of the night finishing the book that I had, all the way to now being an adult. So what I have been doing is spending a lot of time around language. Obviously in this case it's the English language, because unfortunately that's the only one that I can speak. But yes, and so I have embedded myself within it, which means I'm going to pick up on new things, right? Each author, each book is written differently. The syntax, right? The way that they describe things, and they use language as a tool to elicit emotions from us. And the variety that you experience, if you'd like, with each of these books is the power in itself, right? But also, if you stumble across words that you don't recognize, I will look them up. I want to understand what this word means, which means that I'm building my vocabulary, right? That's what's happening as I interact more and more with these books. And so if you're interested in improving, your public speaking skills, then the tool of language is something that you must surround yourself with. And like I said, it doesn't have to be books that are specifically designed for how to speak publicly and so forth. Whilst if you're interested in those, go ahead. But just make sure that you're spending enough time around it. Effective storytelling is one of the biggest components about public speaking. And if you're reading books, but actually it's not even just books, it could be blog posts and articles, it could be magazines, right? It doesn't actually just have to be a book, but it is just written communication, which translates into verbal communication, because that is effectively what it's founded on, right? This is just in a different form. The next tip is actually about studying speakers. So here things become a little bit more deliberate. Now it's not just about generally immersing yourself in language, but it's actually picking out the things that you find appealing or that you actually shy away from when you hear people speak publicly, or whether it is something on like YouTube and you're wondering what it is about this person and the way they're speaking that is able to entice me or is able to grab my attention and keep it, or why I like listening to them for extended periods of time, why I like the way that they tell stories. So this is where you actually watch people and take notes, and I try to do this in any situation that I'm in, especially if I'm watching someone live, right? I recently, well, not that recently now actually, but I did attend an SRE event which happened over 2 days, and there was lots of speeches, from different people in the industry, and I actually wrote down, as much as I was writing down the notes about like the technologies and the frameworks and all these things, when I had a speaker that really captured me, I would write that down in the notes about why that was, right? Like there was one lady who used like a lot of humor and she used memes, but she also had a picture of her dog up there and she spoke a little bit about her dog. So she personalized herself. It wasn't just a random person there speaking about, whatever in the SRE world or monitoring and alerting. She made a connection with us, right? And then, like I said, the humor, we were laughing, people were engaged, like what's going to be next on the slide. She also didn't use loads of words on these slides. And I know this is such a basic thing, but when people are presenting, a lot of people still do this, right? I've done it before as well, but the fact that there wasn't too much going on meant that I could focus on her, but there was enough to keep me kind of guided. There was enough structure for the flow to work effectively. And on the opposite end, I remember being in a talk and thinking, this is actually boring. And I don't mean to say that in a rude way, because I'm not saying that I'm the best talker or I'm the best public speaker, but I was bored and I looked around and I wasn't the only person who was bored. And trust me, it's not easy to speak publicly, and I don't want to downplay this, but I want to be honest, because if we're honest, we can pick apart why that is and then, embed that in our own process. And there was things that I noticed, like the pace, like I said, things on the screen, there was loads and loads of writing, or, the person actually was taking a long time to get to what we were interested in. And that was something else that I noted in my notes, which was get to the main feature as quickly as you can to engage your audience. And so I actually wrote that down, right? Like that I wasn't quite engaged with the speaker and it was really hard to concentrate because of X, Y, Z. So next I actually want to take a step back and talk about idea generation. Basically the foundation of the things that you're going to talk about, whether it be in a situation like this, like I said, YouTube, or a speech on the main stage, or actually maybe in networking events, or if it's going to be in a one-to-one with a potential employer. How do you kind of craft and structure things in a way that makes sense? And one thing that I have found has been very, very helpful to me is the fact that I have engaged with a multitude of disciplines effectively, right? I love the sciences. I love the natural sciences. I study geography, but I also love art. I have read books in all of these domains, right? Even physics. As you engage with all of these, you start to find links. And one really powerful thing that people use in their speeches is examples, right? And they thread things together. And it's easier to thread things and pull from examples that may resonate with you and the next person, when you're engaging with multiple disciplines. It's like people who understand psychology often can wield that in their speeches to make you feel a kind of way, or to link something they're talking about in finances and the financial world with, your day-to-day and the emotions that you feel when you open up your bank account and so forth. And things start to become a lot more interesting and therefore a lot more engaging. So that's the tip I have for this. Don't be afraid to interact with information from a number of sources. And this doesn't just have to be books. It can be documentaries, right? It can be YouTube videos. It can be books, but it can also be magazines. It can also be the talks you go to. Surround yourself with a wealth of information and from a multitude of sources. The next thing is actually about pace and not being in a rush. Often, in order to sound like we're smart or we just can think of things off the fly, we start to speak very quickly, perhaps in response to what somebody has asked us, or even just on stage. We're kind of rushing through things. And that comes across, whether we like it or not, as a lack of confidence sometimes, right? Like, why are you rushing? Like, why are you not comfortable enough to take your time, per se, and, take us through this journey, whatever that is. And, there are some exceptions, some people who are still very good public speakers, but they speak incredibly fast or incredibly slow. What it really comes down to is finding your pace, the pace that you're most comfortable with, that allows you to articulate your ideas and your words in an effective way without it being too chaotic effectively, or so slow that it's like, are you finished? Or the next one is obvious, but the scales may not be. So I've been doing YouTube for, I think, 4.5 years now, just over, right? So I have been practicing my ability to speak publicly for 4.5 years on this platform alone. But it didn't just start there. I also did public speaking in school. Like when I was the head girl of our sixth form, we had to give speeches. Now, they weren't always the best, but that got me into the rhythm and into practicing my ability to speak publicly. And, that has only grown and improved over time. But I would say that it's not just these big grand things where you're like in front of a big audience or you're here on YouTube. It's also about your ability to speak up in situations like at work when you're having a group discussion. An ability to, raise your hand or put forward ideas right there and then in front of everyone. That is speaking publicly, right? And you'll practice and you'll get used to articulating again your ideas and hopefully communicating them in an effective way, right? It could be even if you're in school and you're a student, raising your hand to answer questions. I remember in uni, it was almost like people were paralyzed sometimes by when a question was asked by the professor. Nobody wanted to speak. I don't know if it was fear. I don't know what it was. And sometimes I felt like I was doing the most because my hand was always going up. But I was genuinely interested in engaging and speaking. And I realized that my own ability to articulate ideas just improved, right? It improved each time that I put my hand up. And also what improves is your confidence, because you realize, whoa, if I do say this thing, the world didn't end. Everyone didn't laugh at me. It wasn't that bad. But then if you do want to scale up, then you do have to think about where you can put yourself in situations where there is a larger audience, right? Can you apply for speaking events within your particular sector? If you work in marketing, if you work in tech, right? If you work in nursing, other events and conferences that are being held where you can apply to speak, where you can put together something and go forward and speak on it. Or can you start a YouTube channel, something like this, or TikTok if you want something on a smaller scale, or Instagram, where you will be speaking and expected to articulate things, from time to time, whether it's every week you post, sometimes people post every day on things like TikTok. You'll get used to it and you'll get comfortable with speaking. Now, another thing that has helped me is actually being able to watch myself back. Now, if you just do a speech or you articulate yourself in some sort of situation, but you have no way to capture it, then it's almost lost to the moment, right? And that's not to say that that's necessarily always bad, but it's very hard to kind of, look back and think, oh, I did this and that, because the moment has passed. And so you're kind of grabbing at bits of information that you can remember from how you delivered that speech. Whereas if you record yourself, you have the time to stop, pause, look, oh, actually, that could have been better. Oh, I noticed that I was really, really fast there. This is something that I did a few months back, where basically being on TikTok meant that I had really, really sped up the way that I was speaking. Like the pace of my speech was really fast, and I didn't like it. But I noticed it because I recorded myself, and I could sense that, okay, that is something that I need to work on and bring myself back down to my normal pace, right? The pace that I'm most comfortable with. So if possible, record yourself, right? You don't necessarily even have to put it up, but if you can record yourself, then again, you can almost analyze it and look back and find your faults and the things that you did really well, lean into those, and maybe cross-reference that with the information that you have and the notes that you've been taking on the different people that you've heard speak and the things that you liked about it. The next tip is kind of a hack, but it's basically speaking about things that you're knowledgeable about or that you actually have an interest in. Because then things are going to flow out of your head a lot easier than if you are speaking on things that you have very little information on or that you're just not really that engaged with, right? Sometimes you can tell somebody that really doesn't want to be up there speaking about that thing, right? And you're like, and you can feel it and I can feel it and everyone's looking like, why are we here, right? And so if you can navigate or put yourself in situations where you're speaking about things that you're interested in, that will really help, and it will help with confidence, right? You'll feel more confident and you'll exude that confidence because you're sure, you're at least a lot more sure than you would have been in that topic and in that subject. But this also leads into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is preparation. And this is the whole things that you're knowledgeable about in a bit more depth, right? If you've done your background work and you've made some notes about the topic that you want to talk about, even if it's not scripted word for word, and you know what examples that you may want to draw on from your own life, that is going to leave you feeling a lot more confident and prepared for, this public speech that you're about to give, or the video that you're about to record, or the interview that you're about to go into. This is something that's very powerful in interviews. And it's something that I think has helped me, get very quickly to six figures in tech, despite not having a degree in tech or anything like that, is because I almost over prepare for a lot of these interviews, right? And I can tell the difference when I do prepare and over prepare and when I don't, and how I navigate and conduct myself in those interviews, how I articulate my ideas and my understanding of their problem and how I can solve it. And as the stakes of the situation go up, it's one thing if you're kind of just talking to someone on a one-to-one at a networking event, although it can very much help if you understand who's going to be at the event or what it's roughly about, so you can discuss those things. But obviously, the stakes get a bit higher if you're going to be in front of an audience of 1,000 people. Or if you're going to be negotiating with a top tech firm for, a job that you want. One of the last things I want to talk about is actually leaning into your unfair advantages. So one of mine happens to be my voice. Apparently, I'm just saying that's what people have said to me, right? And so it means that I can start to use my voice in a way that I know will probably help with my public speaking, right? It will help with the way people engage with me and that the fact that they like listening to me. But for other people are really quite funny. And whilst I think humor can definitely to an extent be learned, there's some people who are just almost innately funny without really trying. And when they bring that to their speech, everyone's laughing, they love it. Right? And so what is your unfair advantage, right? What is it? And sometimes it is just how knowledgeable you are on a particular subject, which means when you get up and stand there, you can talk and you can riff on these points for a long time, or actually the opposite way, in a very concise way, which is actually, I didn't have this on my list, but now that it's just come to my mind, it's actually not about how long you can talk for, but how concise you can make some of your points. And there's this saying and then there's this quote effectively that is about, when you really know a subject, you can speak about it in a really brief way, right? Like you can get the point across really quickly, versus when you don't, that's when you often start to waffle. So linking back to that is, can you deliver the message in a concise way? Anyway, the final point I want to make is it's a process. It's a skill like any other, which means you can iterate on it. You'll get better, right? I'm not finished. There are lots of things I would like to improve about the way that I speak and the way that I deliver information, but I'm proud of where I've come from, right? Like going from point A to point B where I am now. And whatever the road ahead looks like. So don't just think that it's like, oh, well, I'm just not born with it. This is not that thing, right? This is a skill like any other. And therefore, if you practice, if you engage, if you study, if you analyze, you'll be able to get better. Anyway, that's it. I've kind of been putting off doing this video for a while. Like I said, I was like, who am I to talk about public speaking? But if the things that I've said today can help anybody and help them feel more confident when they are speaking, then it's all right. I'll see you in the next video.